I wanted to talk about the uncommitted movement because it's kind of like made its agenda clear now. This was a movement that started out in protest of Joe Biden and mobilized over 100,000 votes in Michigan as uncommitted, people writing in saying they're not committed to any candidate because they will not support anyone who is carrying out genocide or supporting genocide in Gaza. The movement carried over into Minnesota, got tens of thousands of votes there, tens of thousands of votes around the country in Democratic Party primaries. And then suddenly, the Kamala coup happened. Joe Biden was replaced by someone who said that they would do absolutely nothing different than Joe Biden did, who was his vice president, who has participated in numerous Israel lobby events since October 7th, including one at the White House, pushing the hoax of systematic sexual assault on October 7th. And the uncommitted movement started to close ranks with Kamala Harris. This is after the Democratic convention, where they were denied even the ability to have a vetted speech for a few minutes after the families of Israeli hostages and captives spoke. And they were humiliated and reduced to a sit-in outside the Democratic convention. And now the uncommitted movement has published a lengthy ad for Kamala Harris, basically endorsing Kamala Harris when she has delivered them nothing, no promises, and they become part of her campaign. It's an ad really against Donald Trump, but it's trying to make the case for kufiya-wearing activists and Arab Americans that they have to vote for Kamala Harris because, hey, it's really bad right now. People are being burned alive. 400,000 people are being ethnically cleansed. Yeah, it is a Holocaust, but it could be a worse Holocaust. That's kind of the theme of this ad.
Something clever Project 2025 did was put forth an objectively insane document that is so extensive, it's hard to actually conceptualize individual parts, effectively saturating a very real threat.
This is the uncommitted movement.
So today, I wanted to talk about the specific ways Trump and Project 2025 would be disastrous for Palestinian human rights. As a Palestinian American, the current administration's handling of this genocide has been beyond enraging and demoralizing. But the reality is that it can get worse. Nobody wants a Trump presidency more than Netanyahu, because that is his ticket to wiping Palestine off the map. Under Trump, U.S. foreign policy took a sharp turn that prioritized Israel's hardline right-wing agenda. During his administration, Trump moved the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem, recognized Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights, and proposed a Middle East plan that effectively dismantled any pathway to Palestinian self-determination. But what's coming next, under Project 2025, is even more dangerous. This initiative promises to cut all humanitarian aid to Gaza and the West Bank, effectively closing off not just the meager resources getting in, but one of the only points of contact Gaza has with the outside world.
There cannot be, between Jordan and Israel, within a few miles of Tel Aviv or Jerusalem or Haifa, there cannot be a state run by Palestinians.
David Friedman, Trump's former ambassador to Israel, is pushing for the annexation of the West Bank and has openly advocated for expelling Palestinians from Gaza, making it clear that there's no place for Palestinians in their own land.
In Gaza's waterfront property, it could be very valuable to...
Jared Kushner has echoed these sentiments, suggesting Gaza could be turned into a valuable waterfront property if Palestinians are forcibly relocated, proposing the entire population be moved to the Negev desert, allowing Israel to finish the job. These policies signal a future where Israeli expansion is no longer just tolerated by the US, but it's encouraged.
And once back in the White House, he will also keep his promise to help Israel win the current war without worrying about what the rest of the world might think.
Trump's top donor, Miriam Edelson, has pledged over $100 million to support his return to office, praising his past actions and pushing for even more aggressive pro-Israel policies. She's made it clear that Trump is viewed by Israel's right wing as a savior figure who will deliver on their most extreme goals, including massively expanding settlements. But the threat doesn't just stop overseas. Here at home, Project 2025 would severely limit activism by revoking legal protection for human rights organizations and criminalizing protests against Israeli policies, undermining our First Amendment, and silencing the few voices advocating for Palestinian rights. Who will be elected in November is clear. It's Trump or it's Harris. And we have to orient less towards who is the better candidate and more towards what is the better anti-war approach in building our collective power. It's clear Netanyahu will be doing everything in his power to get Trump elected. And we have to do everything in our power to stop him.
So basically, the message is, well, they're deploying facts. It is a fact that Trump is completely ziocucked by Adelson and Jared Kushner, and that they are fanatics who will do anything that Netanyahu wants. That is a fact. But there are also objective facts that are omitted. Like, how will that be any different from what is happening now, where Israel gets to do whatever it wants and the Biden administration does absolutely nothing? And how can you be a part of Biden's base with an organized block of voters and be making no demands of Biden before basically calling it in and just saying, hey, making any demands of Kamala before calling on that organized bloc to vote for her? It just defies everything I've ever learned about activism or known about how to do politics. Power concedes nothing without a demand. But what they seem to be saying is power concedes nothing without a hypothetical possible scenario in which things might possibly get better, but we can't tell you how.
Yeah, I thought the point of the uncommitted movement was to, break from the Biden policy and impose a cost if Biden refused to stop fueling genocide. But to turn that around and to start campaigning for Kamala with no promises of any change undermines the whole point, at least that I thought it was. I do understand the tough position that, Arab Americans, Muslim Americans are in. Everything that she said there about Trump is true. And on top of that, you also have Trump. He tried to do the Muslim ban. He is more like openly Islamophobic than the Democrats are. But the critical point, as you mentioned, is the policy is the exact same. Would there be any improvement in Kamala Harris's policy over Trump's? Not that I can see. So they're just giving away their vote without getting anything for it, and it's it defeats the whole purpose.
Giving away their vote. They all oversaw a petition, and I have serious questions about this for the organizations that signed on to this petition, that endorsed it. Jewish Voice for Peace, If Not Now, the Democratic Socialists for America, kind of like the major leftist groups that are out there, many of them protesting the genocide. They just said, as Democrats, we ask you. So it's funny that they all identify as Democrats, not like independent voters or leftists or whatever. We ask you, Kamala, it's addressed to Kamala Harris, to cut off weapons to Israel in order to effect a ceasefire. Well, it's a completely reasonable message, but there's no threat there. They're not threatening to withhold their votes. They're just appealing to her and to her better angels, as though there aren't much more powerful forces which are bearing down on her with billions of dollars. Well, certainly maybe hundreds of millions of dollars in donations, which are critical to her getting reelected in a country where campaign finance is completely unregulated in an oligarchy. So what do they think they're going to get? Their only power is as swing voters in a state like Michigan, where a small percentage of people can actually swing the vote. So the only power that anyone is using to actually affect policy is the Abandon Harris movement, which is just saying, you screwed us. You're spitting in our face. You're showing us total contempt. And so we are going to show you the door. And in the future, other candidates will have to recognize our power. So the Uncommitted movement has played objectively a role in amplifying Zionist power in the election by suppressing the moral force and the actual political power that was accumulated during the primary, by just deadening it. It all ends up with Project 2025. Who the hell cares about Project 2025? Yeah. What about Project 2024 in northern Gaza? Isn't that supposed to be your issue? Like, it's happening right now.
Well, their counter argument is that under Trump, we'd have no chance of influencing any policy, whereas under Kamala Harris, we might. So therefore, we might as well try with Kamala. But the problem is this experiment has been played out many times. And as has now been made clear, Democrats just don't care about the anti-genocide vote. They just don't. They take it for granted. And it's easy to take it for granted when people pledge up to support them. But at the same time, I understand the predicament people are in, and it's not something,
What have they gotten from Biden-Harris?
Nothing.
What did they get? Sanctions on 4 settlers in the West Bank?
Which were even like withdrawn or something, right?
Yeah, withdrawn. A pause. Oh, the sanctions on the Netzah Yehuda battalion which were withdrawn by Blinken. Blinken said they've been remediated. And then they sent those guys into Gaza and they're like sniping children in their heads.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Like how easily moved people are by the Democratic Party, even when they're watching a genocide in real time that they organized against. I'm pretty stunned.
But again, you know, from their point of view, they see Trump and they see Jared Kushner, and they are understandably afraid of that as well. And so they're, you know, it's like, it's not as if Trump offers them anything positive to support. So I think it's I don't know, like I understand the predicament that some people are in, and it's not easy, but I just looking at, have Democrats ever offered them anything positive? Like Obama one time didn't veto a UN Security Council measure that was very symbolic anyway, at the very end of his administration. That's the one thing Obama did. What did Biden do for Palestinians? Well, he facilitated a genocide that I'm not sure any other, I'm not even sure if Trump would have let this go on for this long, you know?
I mean, he kept saying Israel needs to finish the job fast and this needs to end. And I would have prevented it. I mean, I don't think Trump loves Israel or has any particular affection for them. He just has this somewhat anti-Semitic view that wealthy Jews are power brokers and that he needs Miriam Adelson's money. So he'll just do what they want. But one thing is for sure, if Donald Trump were doing this, there would be much, much more opposition from Democrats in Congress.
100%.
And they would be, you know, groups like Move On, these fake grassroots groups would be sending out petitions and sending their people into the street to protest and they would try to make this Trump's war.
Yeah. And AOC wouldn't be getting up and lying and saying that the administration is tirelessly working for a ceasefire, right? Which she said because the Democratic administration was in power. So she, as a Democrat, felt compelled to lie on their behalf and say, but of course, if Trump was doing the same policy, she wouldn't be lying about that and saying that, you know, Donald Trump was tirelessly working for a ceasefire, as she said about Kamala Harris, which I haven't heard an update on from AOC. Like, is Kamala Harris still working tirelessly for a ceasefire as people are burning alive with U.S.-made bombs? So it's true. Democrats are making a really strong case that they're better out of power than in power.
Yeah. And there's, you know, allegations that they got, I mean, and I've actually talked to people inside the Uncommitted Movement at early phase who tell me that basically it's run by careerists. Waleed Shahid is one person that they point to who want jobs in the administration or who are very close to the Democratic Party elite. I mean, he's someone who helped organize the squad. And they're being led by careerists and opportunists, and they're asking people to settle for crumbs off the master's table. So we'll see how voters react in Michigan to this. I think there needs to be a reckoning, and then a recognition that business as usual can't continue, that the special relationship is actually harmful to the ambitions of the Democratic Party in a national election.